we can avoid any interference. And I will turn it over to Chairman Elmore. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Jonathan. Good morning, everybody. My name is Thomas Elmore, Chair of the Connecticut Historic Preservation Council, and I'm calling to order our April 5th, 2022 meeting. Before we get started, I just wanted to let everybody know that I've thrown my back out very badly and I'm in a lot of pain. So if you see me grimacing or shifting, it's because of that. But also because of that, I've asked Sarah Nelson to be vice chair for today's meeting to help me out in case I need to exit the meeting. So with that, we'll do a roll call vote of the members that are with us today. Beth Ackley. Beth
Aye.
I'm sorry. I'm just going to list you off. Beth Ackley, Beth Burgess, Paul Butkus, Marguerite Carnell, myself, Thomas Elmore, Leah Glazer, Andy Horowitz, Sarah Nelson, vice chair for this meeting only, and Sarah Sportman. We have a quorum. Let's get started. The following is the Historic Preservation Council's format and review of public comment procedures. Given the online format of today's meeting, and for those who are visitors today, I want to review and explain our procedures. Order of presentation. I will read each motion and ask for the motion to be moved and seconded. Staff will present the agenda item to the council. Council members will have an opportunity to ask questions. If called upon by staff, a representative of the organization may offer statements or address council's questions. For members of the public who wish to speak to the agenda item, we ask that you identify yourself and your affiliation. After all questions have been addressed and statements made, a roll call vote will be taken. If members of the public have letters and/or written statements they wish to submit for the record, please email them to Jonathan Kinney. His email address is jonathan.kinney@ct.gov. The Historic Preservation Council takes statements from members of the public, but does not respond to questions. Lastly, please only address the particular agenda item being addressed at that time. The following is the Historic Preservation Council's policy regarding conflict of interest. The Historic Preservation Council votes on matters which provide leadership, service, and economic benefits to property owners, consultants, local governments, and not-for-profit organizations. Given this responsibility and to maintain the highest professional standards in the discharge of our duties, it is important to maintain a strong code of ethics for all council members and department employees. In order to avoid possible violations of the Department of Economic and Community Development Ethics Statement, it is necessary for the council to be aware of any situations in which there is a real, potential, or apparent conflict of interest involving anyone here. A conflict of interest may occur when a public official's participation in agency matters results in personal financial gain. All council members and staff have been provided with a copy of the Department of Economic and Community Development's ethics statements and governing state statutes. Having reviewed them and today's agenda, members of the council and staff are now asked to disclose any affiliations with entities or projects that may create a conflict of interest as defined by agency policy and pursuant to Connecticut General Statute 1-79 through 1-89 entitled Code of Ethics for Public Officials. Once disclosed, the member or staff member may recuse themselves from a particular agenda item. Having read this statement, are there council members or staff members that would like to disclose a conflict of interest to any of the items on today's agenda?
Beth Ackley, I'd like to recuse myself from the Ledge Light project discussion as I'm one of the consultants on the team.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Beth. Anybody else? Okay, also just to let you guys know, I'm working off a small old laptop, and when we get into the meeting, I may not see your hands raised. So cut me off before we proceed so that you can ask your questions. So recused members are asked to leave the meeting platform. Staff will send a text message to members when they may return to the meeting. For council members being recused, please make sure that staff has your cell phone number so that they communicate with you via a text message. First item on the agenda today is the meeting minutes. The meeting minutes were provided to council members via the March 15th email from Jonathan Kinney. I know Marguerite had submitted some edits and corrections. Jonathan, I have some, but I don't know when I'm going to get them to you. I apologize for that. Does anybody else have any, or has anybody else submitted any to Jonathan?
Tom, this is Sarah.
Mhm.
On page 12, I'm sure this was picked up by Marguerite and others under item 11, first paragraph. The date that will work best for everybody for the CEPA, CEPA training, not CPU training.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
And the other thing was on page 4, bottom paragraph. Jonathan, Ms. S. Nelson spoke about the scope and specification issues. At times they are hard to review and understand, should be given the presentation of the material.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. And mine are in line with that as well, Jonathan, so nothing major.
Okay.
So with these miscellaneous edits and corrections, may I have a motion to approve the minutes with the revisions as noted?
Marguerite, so moved.
And a second?
Sarah Nelson, second.
Very good. We'll take a roll call vote to approve the minutes. Beth Ackley,
Aye.
Beth Burgess,
Aye.
Paul Butkus,
Aye.
Marguerite Carnell.
Aye.
I will abstain. Leah Glazer,
Aye.
Andy Horowitz,
Aye.
Sarah Nelson,
Aye.
and Sarah Sportman.
Aye.
Very good. Motion carries. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the transcript for part 2 of the SEPA meeting from December 7th. We're still working on those, so I'd like to have a motion. Let me think. I'd like to recall this to the table. We can do that with a 2/3 vote. And so I'd like to have a motion to recall this to the table and then to immediately table it until next month's meeting. Sarah, might I ask you to create that motion for us?
I will create the motion. I have a couple of questions about that afterwards, but let's create the motion
Okay.
to table it and then I'll ask the question. So I am going to create the motion to recall the transcript to the table, which had been tabled to this meeting. And in recalling it to the table, we will further table it until the May 2023 HPC meeting.
Very good. Thank you. And a second?
Marguerite, second.
Okay. And Sarah, do you want to discuss this now or after we take our roll call vote?
I probably best to do it now. I just I wanted to ask Jonathan about how the work is going with the transcription agency. My concern is that we're 4 months away from the meeting time and the audit that the SHPO's office goes through for our meeting minutes and where things stand with this.
Sure, happy to do that, Sarah. Thank you. So I was speaking with Tom earlier today, and I let him know that we reached out to the transcription service and requested that they go back to the December meeting, re-listen to the tapes, retype the transcript to correct some of the typos and the errors that Tom had identified. We have received the new revised version. It just came in last week. We just haven't had the bandwidth to review 100 and something plus pages before today's meeting. So I anticipate that we'll be doing that in the next week, and that this will all be squared away and we'll have a good picture of where we're at. By the May meeting, we should be able to wrap it up and approve it.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Sarah. Take a roll call vote to table this until next month's meeting. Beth Ackley,
Aye.
Beth Burgess,
Aye.
Paul Butkus,
Aye.
Marguerite Carnell.
Aye.
I will abstain. Leah Glazer,
Aye.
Andy Horowitz,
Aye.
Sarah Nelson,
Aye.
and Sarah Sportman.
Aye.
Very good. Motion carries. To table. Okay. So next item on the agenda is 5A1. These are unfinished action items from previous minutes or previous meetings. The first agenda item, 5A1, the Aldrich Free Library. We need to bring this to the table with a 2/3 vote because we tabled it last month so that we could get additional information. We have the original motion, which is in good order. I don't need to read that again. But I do need to take a roll call vote to make sure we have 2/3 people that want to recall it to the table for discussion, and then we'll get into the discussion. So, sorry, Sarah, do I need a motion and a second for the recall vote?
You do. I'll make the motion to recall
Thank you.
the Aldrich Library to the table.
And a second?
Paul, second.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, and a vote. Beth Ackley,
Aye.
Beth Burgess,
Aye.
Paul Butkus,
Aye.
Marguerite Carnell.
Aye.
I will abstain. Leah Glazer,
Aye.
Andy Horowitz,
Aye.
Sarah Nelson,
Aye.
and Sarah Sportman.
Aye.
Okay, so item is back on the table for discussion. Erin.
Thank you. The Aldrich Free Library provided project architectural plans and bid specifications that were not accessible at the time of the last meeting. These plans and specifications were prepared by Kroski Architects and were paid for and reviewed by as part of a survey and planning grant from our office. The architects will continue to be involved for any final adjustments to the documents, which include masonry restoration and repairs to architectural woodwork, including windows. Jordan Lumpkins is on the call for any additional questions. And that's it.
All right, thank you, Erin. Questions or comments from council members?
Tom, I have one question. I just noticed there were references to removing and replacing the oil tank, but then the schedule of work says they're putting in a gas-fired furnace. And I just didn't know if one was actually happening or not.
Okay.
Jordan, I didn't see that in the grant ask, so I wasn't sure if maybe budget didn't allow that.
Yeah, the budget didn't allow that. We're doing just phase 1 at this time. I think utilities will come in phase 2.
Okay. Paul, does that answer your question?
I guess it's just the scope was calling for cleaning out the existing tank and then removing it. It's underneath the staircase, I believe. So I didn't know how easy it was going to be to get that in and out, or if it was switching over to a gas-fired system, if it would be necessary. So just making sure that the scope was coordinated.
So, Erin, I want to just kind of ask an open question. Based on what Jordan said, this is phase 1, but Jordan just said the utilities are phase 2. Am I understanding this correctly?
Yes.
Okay. So then, Paul, I guess maybe we'll see this when they come in for phase 2 monies.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from council members? Seeing none, hearing none, take a roll call vote. Beth Ackley,
Aye.
Beth Burgess,
Aye.
Paul Butkus,
Aye.
Marguerite Carnell.
Aye.
I will abstain. Leah Glazer,
Aye.
Andy Horowitz,
Aye.
Sarah Nelson,
Aye.
and Sarah Sportman.
Aye.
Very good. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is 5A2 HRF grant for the Branford Land Trust. We tabled this last month to get some additional information which had been submitted for everybody to go and review it. May I have a motion to recall this to the table for discussion? We need a 2/3 vote to recall it to the table.
This is Sarah Nelson. I'll make a motion to recall.
And a second?
Paul will second.
Very good. And then a roll call vote. Beth Ackley,
Aye.
Beth Burgess,
Aye.
Paul Butkus,
Aye.
Marguerite Carnell.
Aye.
I will abstain. Leah Glazer,
Aye.
Andy Horowitz,
Aye.
Sarah Nelson,
Aye.
and Sarah Sportman.
Aye.
Very good. Motion carries. We're back on the table. Aaron, discussion?
Thank you. So I just wanted to say thank you to the small group of council members that followed up with the land trust while I've been sick. The land trust provided a design narrative with photographs as a follow-up to the feedback from the last meeting. The PowerPoint PDF provided to the council shows where the work will take place on each of the buildings, and the photographs reference the scope of work and narrative of the grant. The scope of work is the electrical upgrades, painting, insulation, mold abatement, new heat pump, siding repairs, windows, and a new septic system. Lauren Brown and Bill Chaplin are both on the call for any additional questions.
Any questions or comments from council members?
Sarah,
Sarah,
you're muted.
muted?
Sorry about that. I just wanted to make a comment that this was a very clear presentation of this scope, and I really applaud the Land Trust for putting these photographs and the scope notes together. So I want to thank you. It made it much easier to review the grant application.
I agree tremendously. And Aaron, I think you can use this as an example in the future.
Absolutely.
No, I think they
Nice
did.
job, Lauren and Bill.
I think they did a very good job. Any other questions or comments from council members?
Just one question as to whether or not their architect is going to be involved, kind of overseeing all of the different projects that are kind of documented in their scope. Since we don't have a set of plans that really outline exactly what's happening, it's just want to make sure that there's somebody making sure that it's followed through on, that it follows all of the guidelines.
I believe Rick Weiss plans to continue being involved, but sorry,
That's-
Bill, it looked like you were going to comment.
That's correct. Yes, Rick will be following the project. He'll be drafting the specs and sending out the bid documents.
Great.
Thank you.
Any other council members? Questions, comments? Let's take a roll call vote to approve the application. Beth Ackley,
Aye.
Beth Burgess,
Aye.
Paul Butkus,
Aye.
Marguerite Carnell.
Aye.
I will abstain. Leah Glazer,
Aye.
Andy Horowitz,
Aye.
Sarah Nelson,
Aye.
and Sarah Sportman.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda, Beth, can you please step out?
Yep, I will see you soon.
Next item on the agenda is 5A3, Ledge Light Foundation. The Ledge Light Foundation agenda item was brought up and immediately tabled at last month's meeting with the understanding that it would be back on the agenda this month. With a 2/3 approval vote from council members, we can recall this item to the table for discussion. So may I have a motion to recall this item to the table?
Sarah Nelson, so moved.
And a second?
Beth Burgess.
So this first vote, we're going to have another vote right after this. This first vote is to recall to the table. Beth Ackley?
She's recused.
Thank you. Beth Burgess?
Aye.
Just a second. Yeah, I got her. Paul Butkus?
Aye.
Marguerite Carnell?
Aye.
I will abstain. Leah Glazer,
Aye.
Andy Horowitz,
Aye.
Sarah Nelson,
Aye.
and Sarah Sportman.
Aye.
Okay, so now that it's back on the table, the materials that were submitted per the delay, I'll call it a delay, beat the tabling, whatever you want to call it. We got some additional information. Beth Ackley is actually leading that team or part of the team. She and others submitted a letter and some drawings with a more refined scope. And so I want to have a motion. And did everybody get the separate email with the new motion? Just raise your hand so I can just see everybody. Yeah. Okay. So I'd like to have a motion to accept the new scope of work, and then we'll go through our normal procedures once this is on the table. So a motion to accept the new scope of work.
This is Sarah Nelson. I'll make a motion to replace the description of the scope of work with per the new motion.
Thank you, Sarah. And a second?
Marguerite, second.
Okay, and bear with me, we've got to do another roll call vote. Beth Burgess,
Aye.
Paul Butkus,
Aye.
Marguerite Carnell.
Aye.
I will abstain. Leah Glazer,
Aye.
Andy Horowitz,
Aye.
Sarah Nelson,
Aye.
and Sarah Sportman. Sarah Sportman, are you still with us?
She just came back into the meeting, Tom. I think she might have lost her signal or something.
Okay,
She's back now.
all right. Sarah, we're taking a vote to accept the new scope of work and replace the original motion with the new motion. And we're down to you on the vote.
Oh, I vote aye.
Okay, thank you. All right, so now this is on the table for discussion. Erin, it's up to you.
Thank you. So I just wanted to give a little background. The lighthouse is owned by the New London Maritime Society and leased long-term to the Ledge Light Foundation. The foundation recently received a Good to Great grant, as well as mitigation funding from a nearby environmental review project for immediate urgent repairs. Because of the urgency of this project, the initial application covered more targeted repairs, but several projects in the area coincided, so stakeholders decided to step back with a more holistic approach. Structural engineer Beth Ackley worked closely with stakeholder architects to slightly revise the scope of work. With everyone on the same page, the scope now includes repairs to the metal cornice, gutter repairs, and masonry repairs. I will be working closely with Beth Ackley and the architects to create and finalize bid documents, as this building type requires specialized treatments and construction methods. And, as a reminder, this lighthouse is in the middle of the Long Island Sound. So through the Good to Great grant, Todd from our office has worked closely with the foundation, and the organization's very knowledgeable and longtime leader, Bruce Buckley, are both on the call for any additional questions that council may have. This project has a very tight schedule because of the structure's location means that there's a shorter than usual building season.
Great, thank you, Erin. Erin, before I pass it off to council members for the questions, do you expect that this is the first step or the first request for grant monies for additional work on this? Or does this change in the scope separate where monies are coming from?
So Todd, this is sort of phase one right now, where we're doing, the repairs they need because of the cracked masonry, but then they'll sort of follow up with the more detailed repairs.
Okay.
Yeah, this is really the first step in the long-term preservation of Ledge Light. This is the immediate need, but Bruce and Ledge Light and New London Maritime Society will be working towards long-term plans to deal with things like the apron, interior restoration that needs to be done, and anything else in the future. They have long-term plans to celebrate this site in a way that hasn't been done before. So it's pretty exciting.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Questions or comments from council members? No? Okay. We'll take a roll call vote then to approve the application. Beth is out. Beth Burgess,
Aye.
Paul Butkus,
Aye.
Marguerite Carnell.
Aye.
I will abstain. Leah Glazer,
Aye.
Andy Horowitz,
Aye.
Sarah Nelson,
Aye.
and Sarah Sportman.
Aye.
Very good. Motion carries. Thank you, everybody. Next item on the agenda is 5B1. The Historic Preservation Council votes to award a survey and planning grant funded by the Community Investment Act of the State of Connecticut to the below listed applicant in the amount shown. All grant guidelines and state requirements shall be met by the below listed applicant upon receipt of a grant as administered by the Department of Economic and Community Development. Staff recommends the application for funding. Applicant, Connecticut College. Project, geophysical survey for human burials at Daly Athletic Field, circa 1981, located at 270 Mohegan Avenue, New London. Grant amount of $5,000. May I have a motion to bring this to the table for discussion?
So moved, Tom. Beth Burgess.
Thank you, Beth. And a second?
Paul will second.
Thank you, Paul. And a discussion.
Good morning, everybody. This is Mary Dunn. So staff does recommend approval of this application. This is one of the applications under our new grant funding program for geophysical survey of human burials. As the narrative notes, during construction in 1981 of Dolly Athletic Field, some human burials were inadvertently disinterred or dug up. And although they were later salvaged, they suspected there are additional burials deeper down under the field. And so that is why Connecticut College has applied for this funding to do some survey to discover those burials. I don't think anybody from Connecticut College could be here. And I don't think either of our two staff archaeologists are here to answer technical questions, but maybe Sarah can help me if I can't.
Sure.
Great. Thank you, Mary. Questions or comments from council members?
I have a question, Mary. Is there anything, like what's the next step after they do the survey, say that they discover more burials? What becomes the next step after that, just for our...
I don't know that they address that. However, they have been working with the tribal state historic preservation office. And so, and again, this is where I don't have the expertise, but very often they will re-bury the remains. They may do some analysis to figure out, what the dates are of the lives. It looks like what was discovered in 1981 and salvaged was analyzed. However, I don't know that they have reinterred the remains. So I can find out, but I can't say for sure.
I can speak to that if it's helpful. Those remains actually ended up, they were lost for a long time. It turns out they were actually in Rhode Island at URI.
Excuse me, Sarah, is that you?
Yes, can you hear me? Sorry.
Not really.
I have a really bad microphone on my computer. Can you hear me now if I lean in really close? Okay.
Yes, that's better. Thank you.
So the remains actually, we recently found out, ended up in Rhode Island at URI, and repatriation for those original remains from 1981 is ongoing at the moment. I think that the goal with this survey would be more, not to find more remains with the goal of doing anything with them, but just to identify their location so any future development work wouldn't impact them. So we would know where they were in case something else needed to be done in that area. I think that's the primary goal.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that, Sarah, because in my conversations with Claire Keefe, they were excited at the prospect of getting this grant, because if this is successful, they do plan to make this part of any other future development efforts, to make sure that that they're aware that they're not going to disturb any future remains or human burials. So I think it's a good first step for them.
I
And I
did have
really-
one, oh, sorry, I did have one question, if I could just ask.
Absolutely.
I noticed that it's a 2-acre area. The grant only covers 1 acre, and it said in the application that they would work with the consultant to try to figure out the best area to survey at this time. If they do find burials or don't, I guess, would they be eligible to apply at some later date for the rest of the property?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sarah?
Thanks, Tom. I'm totally in support of this this effort. And Mary, I was just thinking about how to have the information codified in a way that is equally helpful for engineering teams, landscape teams. There might be working on this site after the identification if there are additional locations that are found. Oftentimes surveys like this will present things in kind of a photographic kind of overlay. And if it were possible within the scope of the work to actually have the locations identified on the school's topographic survey, the A2 survey in AutoCAD or whatever platform they're using, that actually kind of eliminates potential sort of lack of understanding as documents are being transferred back and forth.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, we can I can address that with Con College, but also as we get future applications, we can make note of that as well. And we did set a cap of $5,000 for the actual survey. I know that A2 surveys cost, so maybe in the future we may need to allow for that potential as well.
Mary, those are two separate things. And what Sarah's really asking for is that this information not get put in a drawer and forgotten about.
Oh, sure.
That be elevated, documented, and that so any future work, especially on this field and future sites that are documented, it hits them right in the face. It was like, oh, we got this constraint. We have to respect this area.
Right. Oh, yeah. On an existing A2 survey, I guess I was thinking if one doesn't exist, they need to account for that. But yeah.
The likelihood is that an institution like a college will have them, but some smaller organizations might not. But
right.
Well, that is true. That is true, because we will be hopefully working with smaller cemetery associations, which may not have any yet. So okay, but that's great. We will, keep that in mind.
I also like the idea that, as it was presented, that the students are going to be involved. So I think it's a fantastic learning experience. They don't have to drive an hour to get there. Just crawl out of bed and walk across campus. So I think it's any other comments or questions from council members?
This is Andy Horowitz. I appreciated that too, the educational piece of this, and also I appreciated that the college says they're in close consultation with the Mohegan Tribal Historic Preservation Office, and that seemed very good to me. I just didn't know, this is my ignorance, are there specific guidelines that they need to follow in dealing with their, what are likely indigenous remains? Is there a procedure that they must follow, and is it named in this application, or is it saying that they are in close consultation with the Mohegan Tribal Historic Preservation Office? Is that the thing that one ought to look for here, and they've done it?
I don't know that anything is actually, codified, but I do know that our office and probably Sarah Sportman are actually worked with Con College to talk about this project, and our office certainly maintains close communication with NAHAC and the Tribal Historic Preservation Office. And so, depending on next steps, I'm confident that the appropriate actions will be taken.
Yeah, and just to be very clear, I didn't mean to suggest that it wasn't. It looked to me like it was.
Right.
being.
It just wasn't
being
specific.
done
It just
thoughtfully. And I
wasn't,
just wanted to make sure that I was construing that correctly.
you are.
Okay, thank you.
You know, Mary, maybe the next time an application like this comes in, if you can have Kathy Labadia preface the discussion with how these anomalies, because until they're verified with an archaeological dig, they're underground anomalies, how they're dealt with, and exactly what Andy's
Oh, okay.
asking for,
Mhm.
because we could all use that education.
Sure. Okay.
Okay. So I see some hands up. Sarah, your hand is up, and then I see participant 23 has a hand up, whoever that is.
Yes, I just wanted to comment on Sarah's question about documenting any potential fines. I think that for Euro-American cemeteries, that would probably not be a problem. And Euro-American burials, I think it's going to require some, discussion with the tribes to figure out. Many times there's a lot of resistance to having the locations of Indigenous burials documented. Perhaps maybe in restricted capacities, or sometimes only they would like to have that information. They don't want it necessarily to be available, widely available. So I think that it will probably require a longer discussion going forward, maybe just marking out a general area as sensitive as opposed to actual burial locations, just because of the long history of burials being targeted for looting and things of that nature.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, so these are discussions because this is our only second time we've had this grant in front of us. So we'll figure it out. All right. Any other questions or comments? Sarah, you have your hand still up, or you have another question?
No, sorry, I just need to put it down.
Okay. And Sarah Nelson. Okay. Any other questions or comments from council members?
I had, Tom, just a note. NAGPRA is the national group that oversees remains and Indigenous remains and artifacts. So I'm just wondering how that discussion fits in with SHPO and the tribal communities we're talking about here.
Sarah Sportman, do you have any insight on that, or should we just add that to the list for our future discussion?
I can provide a little bit of insight, but I do think it's a good idea at some point. Maybe, Kathy and I can just give a broader discussion of all the different policies, because there are levels of state and federal legislation that play into these issues. So NAGPRA is the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. That has very specific triggers for different types of projects and funding, and it wouldn't apply to burials that remained in the ground. In this case here.
Good to know. Thank you.
All right. Anyone else? All right, we'll take a roll call vote to approve the application. Beth Ackley?
Aye. Oh.
Beth Burgess?
Aye.
Paul Butkus?
Aye.
Marguerite Carnell?
Aye.
I will abstain. Leah Glazer?
Aye.
Andy Horowitz?
Aye.
Sarah Nelson?
Aye.
And Sarah Sportman.
Aye.
Very good, motion carries.
Thank you.
Mary, I have a question. Sorry, I should probably asked it earlier. Do they know who's going to be doing the geophysical investigation, or are they going to make a couple phone calls and say, we've got this field, we've got this grant, are you interested? How's that going to work?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be led by, I believe, one of the faculty, but I do know that that there are specific CRM firms that can do this specific work that Kathy and Corey are familiar with. And so if they do need to procure some other consultation, as long as they do an open bidding process, there's resources to do that.
So you just mentioned the open bidding. This is a $5,000 grant.
Yeah.
Is there a cap for open bidding?
Yeah, as I said that, I realized that at this level of funding, you can actually do a direct solicitation as long as it's to a qualified firm. The cap, I believe, for for anything beyond a direct solicitation is 50,000. So for a $5,000 grant, they can select
Okay,
whoever they want as long as they're qualified.
right. Okay, that makes sense. All right, moving on. Next item on the agenda is 5B2. The Historic Preservation Council votes to award a certified local government historic preservation enhancement grant funded by the Historic Preservation Fund of the Department of the Interior, National Park Service to the below listed applicant in the amount shown. All federal and state guidelines and requirements shall be met by the below listed applicant upon receipt of a grant as administered by the Department of Economic and Community Development. Staff recommends the application for funding. Applicant, Town of Enfield. Project, National Register nomination for the Enfield Public Library dated 1914, located at 159 Pearl Street in Enfield. Grant amount of $20,000. May I have a motion to bring this to the table for discussion?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Paul. Second?
Marguerite, second.
All right, second.
Okay, so a couple things about this. So staff does recommend the application for approval. The town of Enfield became a CLG in 2019, and since then they've just really hit the ground running. They did fulfilled one of their basic responsibilities of updating or instituting a new historic resources inventory. They completed that a couple of years back, and an historic resources inventory always has to have recommendations for National Register nominations, as well as women and minority owned resources. And so this resource was recommended in that HRI. And then concurrently with that, the town of Enfield is doing some transit-oriented development, which our office discovered and it is in this package, would have an adverse impact on historic resources. So as mitigation, the project proponent was asked to invest in some restoration work or rehab work of the library. But prior to that, the library has to be listed as a designated resource. So that's where this application came from. Now, the NR nomination, after consulting with Jenny, is really only going to cost about $8,000 to $10,000. However, the town would also like to, in order to sort of prep it for rehab, do some condition assessment. Those are two different consultations. Those are two different RFPs. So they asked if they could just do the NR first for $8,000 to $10,000, and then with the remaining funding, do another request for proposals to procure an architect to do the condition assessment, which is going to cost way more than $10,000 to $12,000. So they would match any additional funds. I wish Nelson Teresa could be here, but he had a meeting at 10 o'clock, so he couldn't join us. But I will be happy to try to answer any questions that you have.
Beth Burgess, I want to ask you a question because I know that you've gotten a lot of grants for your museum. And I don't know how to ask the question. Thanks for explaining how that offsite project became relevant to this project. But I don't understand the request for the $20,000 for the nomination, knowing that it's going to be half that and then have the additional monies for the assessment. Not that I don't disagree with it, but right. Beth, when you do work at your museum, how do you handle things like this?
It's generally two different applications. I'm going to say that in that process, that's a lot of staff time. And of course, working with SHPO staff also takes up their time. So, I could see the efficiency here in this ask, though, I can't really speak to the two different grant lines, and how they merge. I don't, whatever we decide here would be precedent. Is that right, Mary? Or?
Well, yeah, I believe it. I believe it would. We get this type of request a lot, and to be honest, we are reluctant to do it this way because they cannot do that second RFP for the condition assessment until the building is listed, or at least
Right.
recommended by the state review board. And so I kind of questioned, well, and I think they're just trying to save time. I think,
Yes.
things are moving, and so they want to have that money already sort of obligated and ready to go once the NR listing,
Right.
so yeah, I don't, it's not ideal. I don't, but I said I'd ask, I mean, I
Yeah,
don't see anything wrong with it. I don't see anything wrong with it.
Yeah.
But,
The only other thing would be, how do you keep track of that money that's just sitting over there waiting to be used?
well, it stays with us, so
Yep.
there's that. And so they would have to, produce the NR nomination and produce all of the receipts that paid for that nomination.
Mhm.
And then they would get reimbursed for that portion. And so say that
Right.
was $9,000. They would then have $11,000 obligated for that second RFP, which, as we all know, will not pay for a condition assessment, but
Right.
they would bring their own funding to the table for that.
Hmm.
Okay, thank you.
But shouldn't the project description in the motion reflect that two-tiered approach?
Mhm.
Because right now it only says the National Register nomination.
That's good point. Good point. I guess I just didn't know how to say, and maybe a condition assessment, but yeah, if you are going to grant $20,000, yeah, we should kind of make that clear that it's the whole 20 isn't going for an NR nomination. So,
Well, let's,
yeah,
Mary, let me just interject. So
Yeah.
let's take a roll call vote to change the title of the project. The application doesn't change, and with a 2/3 vote, we can supersede the original motion. Sarah, I need to lean on you again. Is that correct? You're
muted.
muted.
One of these days I'll learn about that. You've got a motion on the table, and yes, you could make a subsidiary motion to alter the request.
Yeah. So Mary, I would like to do that just for transparency purposes.
sure. Yeah.
And, maybe that's actually where my initial question came from. So who would like to make a motion to add the assessment of the building to the project title? Because that's all we're requesting at this point.
I'll make it.
Who was that?
Leah.
All right. Thank you, Leah. And a second?
Excuse me, this is Marguerite. It looked like Sarah wanted to add something there. Sarah Nelson.
I thank you, Marguerite. I was struggling for a moment with the wording, because I just want to make sure that the expectation is not for $20,000. We're having both the NR nomination and the condition assessment. So it's for partial defrayment of the condition assessment. I just don't want them to think that they can get both for one.
No,
Right.
That's a very good point. Okay.
And yeah, I was gonna say their application could have reflected like a total budget cost of, say, 40,000.
Right, but didn't.
But it did not. So.
This is Andy. I'm just confused here. The budget only allocates $10,000. So we are imputing what we think they're going to do with the rest of the money, but they haven't really told us. Is that right?
Well,
You
it
understand
does.
from the conversations, but we don't have any documentation on how they mean to spend the other $10,000.
No, it's in the narrative that they want to use leftover funds to do a condition assessment. But the issue is,
Well, the budget narrative just says,
oh, right. The budget narrative only addresses the NR.
So Mary, I'm going to ask another very direct question. Is there any urgency here? Should we table this for a month to get all of this terminology correct? Again, just for transparency purposes?
Yeah, that's probably a good idea, and I might even encourage them because,
Good
yes,
morning,
that-
Nelson Terrazzo here, Mayor Henry with the
oh, hey,
town.
Nelson.
Chrissy was attending the meeting this morning and she asked me to step in. So you guys are currently discussing our CLG Historic Preservation Enhancement Grant application. Do you want me to provide a little background on this?
Oh, sorry, Tom.
No, we have the background. What we're trying to do is figure out how to expedite your grant in a very transparent, efficient, correct, proper manner. And
Okay.
so we're struggling with some terminology.
Okay. The town, we applied through SHPO. Ultimately, I believe you guys were discussing a two-phased approach to the grant because we are looking to have the library, the Carnegie Library, nominated on the National Register of Historic Places. It's really part of our overall plan of redeveloping a transit-oriented development project down the street. And as part of a mitigation strategy, we've decided to have the developer invest as part of the historic mitigation measures of demolition, invest into this historic resource, which we want to get nominated on the National Register in order to certify it as an historic structure. And then we also want to then perform a conditions assessment, an historic conditions assessment of the facility in order to determine the priorities in regards to the improvements needed at the facility.
Right, but what we're struggling with is the project title is National Register nomination only.
Okay.
And so we're just trying to accommodate you in an efficient manner. We all support the idea, but we're pretty strict on the transparency aspect of it.
Okay.
So, Mary, since it's not an emergency, I guess I'd like to just see council members' hands with, are you okay if we table this for a month to hash out this? It'll come back next month and probably shouldn't be any issues. We okay with proceeding like that? Yes, no? Okay, all right, great. So then may I have a motion to table this application? And Mary, what we're really asking for is just some clarification and both in the title and in what Andy mentioned about the monies. And I think we're good to go for next month.
Yeah, I will, I'll have a total project cost included and the budget narrative revised. And then, of course, the motion will include both projects.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. So we never finished our request to do this. So let me just cross that out. So we've got another motion here to table. Okay, so may I have a motion to table this for 1 month? For clarification and.
I have
This
so
is
moved,
Andy.
Leah.
This is Andy interrupting quickly just to ask, and forgive me, this is obvious to everyone else. Can we award them just $10,000 for the National Register nomination process? And sever this the way that it sounds like is traditionally done, these two requests? Or
No,
does that
no,
bungle things? And
because the motion has $20,000 on it. I mean, so either way, we've got to detangle things.
I see.
Yeah.
I didn't know if we could approve less money at this juncture.
We could, but the application is set up for that part 2. And it's, so I think it'd just be easier if.
I understand. I totally understand and defer to your expertise. Thank you.
Oh, I'm not expert on this part. I'm just leading the meeting. Okay, so may I have a motion to do what we need to do, I guess?
I think Leah made the motion to table
Yeah.
it.
Okay,
I'll second it, Marguerite.
all right. All right, so then we have a motion on the table to table this application for 1 month. Beth Ackley,
Aye.
Beth Burgess,
Aye.
Paul Butkus,
Aye.
Marguerite Carnell,
Aye.
Leah Glazer,
Aye.
Andy Horowitz,
Aye.
Sarah Nelson. Oh, I'm sorry. I will abstain. Sorry. Sarah Nelson
Aye.
and Sarah Sportman.
Aye.
Okay. Motion carries to table this till our May meeting.
Tom, just one other question or comment on the form. It said agenda item VB1
I know.
and it's VB2,
Yeah.
so that can be corrected when we get for next month.
Yeah, I stayed with our published agenda, not the individual agenda item numbers on the motions. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for helping to work that out. Next item on the agenda is 7.1 Historic Property Study Report. Pursuant to CGS Statute 7-147 QC, the Historic Preservation Council votes to recommend approval of the proposed ordinance and boundary for the proposed Samuel Ferris House located at 1 Cary Road, Greenwich, Connecticut, as presented in the study report transmitted by the Town of Greenwich on Farmington on February 28th.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I
So,
think that was supposed to be February, not Farmington. Okay, or, yeah.
all right. So we just got to go through a couple steps here. So may I have a motion to accept, may I have a motion to bring this to the table as presented, and then we'll correct that.
So move Tom, Beth Burgess.
And a second?
Sarah Nelson, second.
Okay, bear with me a second here. And now, got to do a 2/3 vote to change the description, and then we can have our discussion. So I need a motion to remove the on Farmington from the project description, and then we need to take a 2/3 vote on that.
Paul also
Agreed.
moved. Oh,
That's all right.
Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah.
I'll second.
Motion. Second. Let me just make some notes here. To remove text. Okay, and then a roll call vote to accept the revised motion. So let me read the revised motion then. Agenda item 7.1 Historic Property Study Report pursuant to CGS Statute 7-147 QC. The Historic Preservation Council votes to recommend approval of the proposed ordinance and boundary for the proposed Samuel Ferris House located at 1 Cary Road, Greenwich, Connecticut, as presented in the study report transmitted by the Town of Greenwich on February 28th, 2023. And we'll take a roll call vote to accept the revised motion. Beth Ackley?
Aye.
Beth Burgess?
Aye.
Paul Butkus?
aye.
Margaret Carnell?
Aye.
I will abstain. Leah Glazer?
Aye.
Andy Horowitz?
Aye.
Sarah Nelson?
Aye.
And Sarah Sportman.
Aye.
Okay, now we're ready for our discussion. Go ahead, Mary.
Hey, great. Woo, sorry about that.
That's all right.
So yes, so I think all of you here, even the newer members, have looked at study reports before, but what's in front of you is just to, as it said, recommend approval of the boundary and ordinance. This is a single property, so I think that's pretty straightforward. This report is technically complete. It looks like a significant resource, not just locally, but otherwise. I will just note that there are, there's floor plans and interior photographs, which, are fine, but if this property is locally designated under the ordinance, further down the line, the local historic properties committee will have no purview over the interior. So it's not really a necessary part of a study report. It's really just the exteriors, the exterior architectural features. But that's just an aside. I believe Ann Young is here from the study report committee to answer any questions that I can't
Okay, great. Thank you, Mary. Any questions or comments from council members?
Mary, could you explain just what level of protections are awarded by designating it as a local historic property?
Okay, so if it's designated by a local historic property, if it's designated a local historic property by the town, it will come under the purview of either the standing local historic district commission, or they may create a separate local historic properties commission. When that becomes the case, any alterations to exterior architectural features that are visible from a public way will come under the review of that commission. As I said, it doesn't extend to the interior of the building or anything that can't be viewed from a public right of way.
So it's basically parallel to the protections of a district, but it's just a single property.
Yes, and the process for designated is slightly different. Once you make your recommendations, there is a public meeting, but instead of a ballot vote, there's a 30-day interim wherein the property owner can submit a notarized letter objecting. If they don't receive that letter objecting to the designation, then the local legislative body moves on to vote to enact the ordinance. Generally, these single properties are usually initiated with mutual consent, so they're not expecting any objection within that 30-day period. But that's how the statute is written, and we obviously don't encourage towns to just go landmarking properties without the consent of the owner or the cooperation.
Mm-hmm. All right. Any other questions or comments from council members?
Yes, this is Marguerite. I had a question. And this relates to the setting of the house. So it appears that the house was moved, I think, somewhere between 1926, 1932, when the road was widened. And my question relates to its original orientation. The package says that the house is oriented south, which helps to validate its estimated construction date. But the house has been moved. So I just wanted to ensure that we actually know that the orientation was original, or that, was a house documented before it was moved.
Back in 1926, like they could maybe look at Sanborn maps. Is that what you're saying? To see if
Marguerite, you're muted.
Yeah, I was asking if that research has been done.
Yeah, I don't know, but maybe Anne does, who's here. I'm sorry. And I will say that obviously changing the orientation or moving a property generally will discourage NR listing, but for a local property, it's about protection of the resource. But I don't know. I thought Anne Young was here. Maybe she had to.
Yeah,
leave.
she is. She raised her hand, but
Okay,
she's on
great.
mute.
Anne, go ahead, please.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. In regards to documentation about the house prior to its move and post-move, yes.
Anne, we just lost you. Jonathan, is she still with us?
She is, yes.
Okay.
Not sure what happened there. Anne, can you hear me?
Being turned at all.
Oh.
And I need to ask you to repeat that because we lost your mic.
The house was certainly documented with the Sanborn in the 1920 Sanborn. That's the only, real documentation that stands up to close scrutiny. The house was moved approximately 90 feet north. It still retains its same southern exposure. It was not turned in any which way.
Great. Thank you so much for that clarification.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Any other questions or comments from council members?
This is Sarah Sportman. I just have a related question to the moving. I know it said in the application that the cellar hole had been filled in when it was moved, and that there was no archaeological remains, but is that because the road is currently over that site, or is it still there? I guess is a question.
Yeah,
Those,
that's-
yes.
Okay.
Those archaeological remains are still there. If we were to move the house to its original setting, it would come right next to the sidewalk that's there, which of course, I don't know how that would be reflected with present zoning. But if you're asking, could the possibility of a dig or further research be done? The answer is yes, of course. And I think that would be a very, very exciting endeavor. And if you'd like to gently recommend that unofficially, I would love to take that to other people.
I think, you know, if nothing else, it would be useful if it hasn't been done before. I didn't have time to check this morning. I'm sorry. Documenting that location with an archaeological site form might be useful just for future preservation planning as well.
Thank you. I'd love that idea.
Sarah, would you repeat that so she could write it down?
Sorry, my.
Oh, that's okay. No, it's a great idea, but I can't imagine she had a pen in her hand.
Oh, yeah, no, just documenting it with SHPO and OSA in an archaeological site form that we maintain for future planning purposes.
And I
Got
can
it.
put that, I can put that in the comment letter that I'm gonna send to them.
Great, Mary, thank you. Any other questions or comments from council members? Seeing none, hearing none, we'll take a roll call vote to approve the application. As corrected. I moved my papers around. Hang on a second. Yes, as corrected. So Beth Ackley,
Aye.
Beth Burgess,
Aye.
Paul Butkus,
Aye.
Marguerite Carnell.
Aye.
I will abstain. Leah Glazer,
Aye.
Andy Horowitz,
Aye.
Sarah Nelson,
Aye.
and Sarah Sportman.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you, Anne, for coming. Appreciate it.
Yay, thank you so much. Have a great day.
Okay, we need her on council. Next item on the agenda is threatened properties with Todd Levine with an update.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Todd Levine. I have updates on two SEPA issues. The first is an update for the referred Deborah Chapel in Hartford from last December. May 30th, last Thursday, the Attorney General's office filed a temporary injunction to halt the unreasonable demolition of the building, and it was granted.
Can I interrupt for a second? You said May 30th. Do you mean March 30th?
Oh, I'm sorry, March 30th, yes.
Okay,
I
sorry.
did write down March. So yeah, so there is a 6-month injunction that expires in September. So we are going to be working, actually, we meet today. SHPO staff meets today with the Attorney General's office and tomorrow with Frank Farraker, the gentleman who intends to move the building, to move this forward.
Todd, before you go to the second item, again, I apologize for interrupting.
No
Does the lack of our approved transcript affect you? Is it inhibiting you in any way?
It is not.
Okay, thank you.
And the second issue is I just wanted to give you guys an explanation on why we removed the 3135 South Main Street in Norwalk off the Historic Preservation Council agenda. When you know, this process that we have, this partnership with the Attorney General's office and SHPO, was established, you know, in 1995 by, you know, Jack Shanahan and Assistant Attorney General Alan Panansky. And, you know, Alan had always said, and he was our guy up until a couple of years ago when we retired, but he'd always said you need 3 things to have a successful SEPA case. And the first is that prudent and feasible alternative that we always have to show you guys. And the second is a shepherd, and a shepherd is who is for Deborah Chapel is Frank Farraker. He's someone who's a knight in shining armor, who's come, you know, who's going to buy the site and move the building on his own dime to another site in Hartford so it can be preserved. And the third thing is that there can be no additional cost to the owner of the building. Those are the three kind of, tenets that Alan said we always had to have. In this particular case, we have none of those. We worked with, Preservation Connecticut, Kroski Architects, and James Grant Structural Engineers to come up with alternatives, these feasible and prudent alternatives. And we came up with three, none of which any of our professional team were comfortable with. They had serious doubts for all of these options. And in fact said that they would have to state on the record, and that would be in a transcription, that they do not have great, they don't support these options. They don't feel that they're good options. There's no shepherd. We don't have anybody that would come and save this building. And the cost analysis for this doesn't work. The only way we would be able to save this building is save a portion of the building. And at that, we would still have to, sacrifice a lot of potential profit for the owner, which would not fly under the way we do this process. Our process is to find a solution that's prudent and feasible, that does not cost the owner substantial. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't have to make as much money as they can, but they can't lose money off the deal. So between our preservation partners and the professional staff that we bring on, they were not confident that there were any prudent and feasible alternatives. That, along with no letters of support, in contrast to Bora Chapel, we had 30 letters of support. No municipal support. In contrast, the city of Hartford is providing a site to the Bora Chapel. And in the words of Jack Shanahan, our longest serving SHPO, he stated that not every site that's threatened is a SEPA case. And with that in mind, that's why I requested that we remove it from the agenda. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Todd, just so you know, council never saw your in-house working agendas. We only saw the final.
No. Okay. Well,
no,
we had planned to put it on the agenda.
I know. I see Todd Bryant here. Todd, I know you want to say something. I'm going to give you an opportunity when we get down to the public forum. And it's only because we had our agenda already published. And so if you please hold on for a couple minutes, we'll give you an opportunity to talk. Next item on the agenda is the report on State Historic Preservation Office with Jonathan Kinney.
Good morning, everyone. Let me pull that up. I just want to very briefly thank everyone HPC members who attended the March 15th training on the State Register Archaeological Preserve Program and Federal Advocacy Week. And also thank you to the staff who assisted in putting that together and presenting it for us. We continue to work with the OAG on putting together a Protection Act training for you guys, and we will continue to seek a date to put that out. But in the interim, please, if there are other topics that come up or items that you would like to hear about from SHPO staff or that you'd like to expand on at all, please let me know. We'd be happy to put another one of those together for you. The second item I have is related to our GIS system, which I know I've been talking about for a long time, but I'm very excited to announce that we are getting ready for a soft launch of that system in about a week and a half on April 14th, which is so exciting. And I have our colleague Jenny Schofield here, who I believe would like to just say a few words about that launch.
Yeah, we just want to make sure you knew that we are launching. This is the first statewide database for cultural resources for Connecticut, so we are very excited. Soft launch means that any member of the public will be able to go to the website and look at the whole state, look at data points and district outlines for anything that has been surveyed or designated through 2021. So there's no fee, it's available to the public, and We're sending out an e-blast soon about it. You should have seen an announcement in Preservation News as well. And it will be available on conCRIS.ct.gov. So it's CONNCRIS.ct.gov. We will follow the soft launch with a full launch a few weeks later. The full launch will require login access. And so if you're a professional and you need to see archaeological information that's restricted, or you want to pull up associated documentation for any of the data points, you will be able to do that through a login system. And that is also free. There is no fee for any of this. So very excited to share that, and please contact me if you have any questions about it.
Jenny, this is Sarah. I've got a question. Does this replace the state register database that you have for the southern counties? Is that wrapped up in this?
Oh yeah. Yeah. So that database we have online was a project from 2016 that we did with Hurricane Sandy funding. And that was just a first attempt at digitizing some records. So you can now ignore that. And this is a statewide database. You know, we're working with legacy data. We're working with 70 years worth of paper files, which are in various conditions, as you all know. So there will be some adjustments we'll need to make as part of regular maintenance. The geospatial system has within it a feedback form that's very simple and easy to use. So if you see something is not in the right location, or there's something missing, you can simply fill out this form and it gets directly emailed to us. So there will be some long-term correction of that legacy data over time, but this is a pretty good start.
Jenny, I have a question. Sorry. The information that we'll have access to and we can download, is it going to be high resolution or is it going to be downgraded?
Well, this is data within the Esri system. So are you asking about like taking a print screen of the map or making your own map?
No, I guess I was assuming that what we're going to have access to if we clicked in and clicked in and clicked in are the individual papers and photographs from previous reports or HABs or whatever it might be.
Yes, it's high resolution.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, there's also, you'll see when you get in a couple of weeks, we've loaded a variety of base maps as well that you can turn on or turn off. So for example, we have the 1934 aerial map of the state. We have the state's parcel layer. And you will have the ability to extract data from the system and use it, or, you know, create a map through a print function.
Do you think you could do a 20-minute presentation at the end of a future meeting under new business and give us all a dog and pony show?
Yeah, I think we're actually envisioning a pretty large rollout of this where we would do webinars and trainings.
Okay.
So we can do that under an HPC meeting, or we can just do that consistently. I think we'll probably also put one online. Our contractor also has written extensive instructions, which will be online when you go to the website. And that's in story maps, which is just a nice way to lay out the information.
Okay, great.
But yes, we will be doing several trainings.
This is all fantastic news. I'm so excited about this project and really looking forward to using this system. Kudos to everybody involved here.
Thank you. Thank you, Jenny. Appreciate it. The last thing I had, Tom, was simply to let everyone know that I'm very happy to announce that I have reached out to a professional planner in Connecticut who has tentatively accepted a spot on the HPC. I will be providing additional information as that person gets onboarded, but looking forward to having another professional with that skill set join the council. Excuse me. That's all I had.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions for Jonathan or Jenny? Next item on the agenda is reports on museum properties. Liz Shapiro.
Hello. You know, when some days when your mouse isn't working and you don't really know why. Oh, okay, there we go. Okay, so I just have a short report today, but I wanted to let you know that the museums are prepping for summer season, or a spring opening for our summer season, our 23 season, fiscal year 23, or calendar year 23 season. Currently, we're in the midst of interviewing 21 candidates for 12 positions as seasonal employees, which is a lot of interviewing. And we would have hoped to have this long done before, but it's been a long drawn out process. We'll be finishing the interviews on Tuesday, April 11th, and we're hoping to have the applicants chosen and ready to start by May 1st. Sometimes it happens, right? So I remain optimistic. The museum staff had our final workday of the off season yesterday at the Crandall Museum, and we worked in teams to accomplish a whole variety of tasks on site, including getting rid of some of our deaccessioned books, and even a foray into the Prudence Crandall barn in order to devise a plan to empty the contents of the barn and do a deep clean in the late fall. One of the things we've learned is that DECD staff who are not used to going into barns on a regular basis were a little horrified when they went into the Crandall barn. We went in and we're like, what's their problem? So, some spiders and bat guano. Apparently our colleagues are not that happy with that. So we're going to deal with it. And then just to let everybody know that all 4 museums are on target to open between May 3rd and May 6th for the season. They'll go through the end of October. Everyone except for Prudence Crandall has a really busy schedule of public events that are already set up, including bringing back our State Museum Sundays, which occur on the 3rd Sunday of every month. And on that 3rd Sunday of every month, all the 4 state museums offer free admission to Connecticut residents. The Prudence Crandall Museum, we're a little behind because we're still waiting for our final interpretive panels to come. But we are looking for starting off the season. They will be opening around May 6th, but starting off the season with a press conference, hopefully featuring the Secretary of State and the Lieutenant Governor, both of whom are really big fans of the site and who have been to the site recently, and then a big public reopening on July 16th, and then a symposium actually to be held in the fall. So really excited about all of that. Because it feels like finally things are going to be back to normal. And work will be starting sometime this season, probably by the end of the season at the Henry Whitfield House. We do have an accepted RFP to put the plan together to do the work that is being funded by the America 250 grant. So there's lots going on, and next meeting, I will probably have time to put together like a schedule of events that I can post in the chat, so you can just have a quick link to what's going on. But anytime any of you want to visit any of the museums, just reach out and ping me, and we'll make sure to have someone there to welcome you and give you a special tour experience. I'm really, really pleased at what's happening this season. It's exciting. It feels almost like back to normal year. So that's all I've got for you today. Thank you.
Great, Liz. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is new business, under which we have 3 items. The first item is discussion on the overview of the Community Investment Fund with Matthew Puglisi, if I pronounced your name correctly.
You got it right, Tom. Thank you very much.
Tom, did you want me to? Oh, I'm sorry, Matt. I didn't know if you want me to introduce sort of what the discussion was. Tom.
Absolutely. That
okay. So thank you. Sorry, Matt. This is Jonathan. I was asked by several council members to prepare a brief description of the Community Investment Fund, which Matt is a director of. They do have some overlap with SHPO in a regulatory from a regulatory standpoint, but also they're funding projects that could be historic preservation programs. So there is a lot of overlap, and we invited Matt here just to do a quick overview to share with council sort of the basics on the program and what's eligible, who's eligible, and stuff like that. So take it away, Matt. Sorry.
No, thank you very much, Jonathan. I appreciate it. I'm just going to share my screen because everybody learns in different ways and have that up. Can you guys see that?
Yes.
All right, so I will do my best to be very brief. But basically, the Community Investment Fund, for those that aren't familiar, is a 5-year commitment of $875 million in state bonded grant funds to fund transformational economic and community development projects in underserved municipalities across the state. And DCD administers this program. We run the application and review process and administer the projects once funded, but DCD does not make the decisions. I just want to stress that. The Community Investment Fund has a board that makes recommendations to the governor, who then approves or denies these recommendations and places them on the State Bond Commission agenda for final approval. And round 3 is scheduled to open on May 1st and close on June 30th. So that'll be starting our 2nd year. There are 2 rounds per year, so we have 8 more rounds in front of us. Eligibility, I have it up on the screen here. It's really easy. There's 3 requirements. 1, you have to be located in an eligible municipality. There's 55 eligible municipalities across the state, from our biggest city to our smallest towns. The communities are all public investment communities and alliance districts, and you can find that list specifically on our website. And then there's 3 types of eligible applicants, either the municipality itself, a community development corporation, or nonprofit that operates within those eligible municipalities. So then the next piece, all community investment funds clearly need to be used towards a project that serves these eligible communities, and that it's either a capital project, broad types there, including, and I think this is what everybody here cares about, renovation or rehab of public facilities.
Matt, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
We're not seeing any progression of your slides.
Oh, I'm still on the same slide.
Okay. Sorry.
No, not a problem. Jonathan limited me to slides. So lots of talking at once. So eligible project, I'm right here below the and in the middle. So they need to promote economic or community development in the community, the municipality where the project's located. And then the final piece is that the project needs to support the further consistent and systemic, fair, just, and impartial treatment of all individuals, including individuals who belong to underserved and marginalized communities. And just to be clear, because a lot of applications struggle with that. So somebody comes and says, we need to renovate and expand our library, and everybody that lives in our community can use the library. There's no limitation on who can use the library. And that is good, and that's true, but really the important piece here is to connect, how does this specific project or this program, how is it going to benefit a specific underserved population? And it's not to say that it has to be limited to benefiting that underserved population, but it can't just be benefiting the whole community. So I think we have webinars coming up at the end of April and beginning of May that you can sign up for starting tomorrow on the CIF website that'll go into much greater detail. But I think that this change that we have here in round 3 for planning grants is one of the reasons that Jonathan wanted me to speak today. So the Community Investment Fund Board last month created a new grant category. It's a planning grant that's for a set amount of $250,000, and it can be used specifically for certain eligible activities. And the goal of this award is really to help an applicant get farther along in the process so that they can come back in a future round with a capital project request that's more shovel ready and more fleshed out. So funds can be used specifically for community engagement processes, feasibility studies, sustainability analysis and planning, development of a project plan, conceptual drawings, and construction budget documents and preparation. So that's what the planning grant can be used for. It's a great tool to take an idea that is early on and get some more meat onto the bones so that it can be competitive within the pool of applications. Again, the Community Investment Fund, I just want to stress, it's really for transformative projects. So we're looking for very simply new outcomes or increased outcomes. And we really want applicants to think about this and talk about this. not just what they're currently doing, but how the project is going to build and expand on what you're currently doing. And especially with public facility renovations, that's the single largest category of applications that we've received across the 2 rounds. I think it represents about 50% of all applications. Feasibility and sustainability, there are no operating funds through Community Investment Fund. It's just for those hard capital costs and some soft capital costs. So once the state funds the renovation or expansion of this building or, historic asset, how is it going to sustain? That's a really important piece. So I'm doing my best to keep, short. I'm happy to answer any questions, but the best way to reach out to us is the information that we have up here. We do one-on-one 30-minute meetings with interested applicants, and we do have informational webinars that are coming up. So that's what I got, and I'm happy to answer questions, Tom.
That's great, Matt. I have one question, 2-part for you. Can you quickly give us 2 totally different examples of approved projects so we have an understanding of what a successful project would consist of?
Yeah, they're a little bit all over the place. Let me think off the top of my head if I can come to something that might be really relevant for the group. A project that just came forward in round 2 is the town of Manchester received money towards a Main Street streetscape traffic calming project that is also tied into a new library that they're going to be building downtown on Main Street. So that was one project. We have also seen a couple of smaller nonprofit projects in both round 1 and round 2 that are renovations of nonprofit organizations with older buildings, roofs and lots of brick and mortar stuff that allows them to increase their service to the, kind of target at-risk populations that they serve through their activities. But I can have Jonathan share, we have lists of kind of project summaries of all 52 projects that have been funded thus far that might be really helpful for everybody to see.
That would be great. Thank you. Appreciate you coming. Does anybody else have any questions for Matthew?
Just one question, Tom. Matthew, this is a great introductory overview. Would you be comfortable providing the slides that you showed?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that, and I'll
Okay.
throw a link in the website a link in the chat to our website. So,
Terrific. Thank you.
you're welcome.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you,
You're
Matt.
welcome, guys. Thanks for having me.
Next item under new business is an overview of SHPO HPC grant awards for calendar year 2022.
Okay, I'm doing that one, and I think I'm going to try to share my screen as well, if I can. Hold on a minute. Oops. Except I can't find, oh, wait, hold on a minute. Oh my goodness. I can't find my thing. Does everybody have the spreadsheet in front of you? I'm gonna just look at it on my own laptop. This represents awards that you've made during calendar year 22. I could have done it by fiscal year, but the last fiscal year ended last July, and I kind of wanted to make it a little bit more current. As you'll see in the little gray box on the right, a typical budget or typical Community Investment Act deposits come in at about 3.3 million a year. We've been getting a little more than that in recent years. And so just a quick overall, our total deposits to Community Investment Account were 3.7 million. By statute, Preservation Connecticut gets 380,000. We take 10% for administrative costs and 10% for museums. So that left a total of $2.6 million in funding for grants last fiscal year. We actually awarded 2.9 million, which you will notice is more. However, because these funds don't lapse, and because we had a bit of a surplus, we had that funding to award. you also awarded $160,000 in federal non-matching grants. So, and then I think I included a list of all the folks that got grants from you last year. Sorry, I had trouble sharing screen, but if you had a chance to take a look at the spreadsheet and have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Mary, I appreciate you putting this together for us again, because it really helps us understand where we've been and what we're doing and how valuable what we and you and everybody is doing to the state of Connecticut. So thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Mary?
This is Sarah. I've just got one question. Mary, I've been on the council long enough to know that there were times when the funds from the Community Investment Act were redirected or oftentimes desired by other entities. What is the greater picture of the stability of the funds these days?
Well, these days and in recent years, there have been no attempts to alter deposits, intercept anything. You're right. Just 8 years ago, was it 8 years ago? The budget, the general budget was intercepting half of the funds before we even, gave away portions to, all of the other entities. Obviously, we can't predict the future, but we've just been super happy that it hasn't even come up in the state budget in recent years. I don't know if Mary Falvey's on the line with CPA and HPA, but hopefully that'll stay. Hopefully, I mean, the more this has been around for 20 years, more than 20 years. I think the more constituents we help, the hopefully the stronger it stays.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Questions for Mary?
Mary, I have a question. The funding that's available, it seems like, but correct me if I'm wrong, the system is sort of, the need is about what the demand, or the demand is about roughly what we have, simply because you as a team have been adjusting, or I suppose we collectively, but SHPO staff is certainly directing us, to adjust grant amounts. I guess the question is that how you match the demand to the funding? Is those grant amounts? Like,
yeah,
the limits, the grant limits.
Exactly. We've had to make some really painful choices in the past, limiting the number of times a year we've even been able to look at grants, lowering the HRF cap. We just raised the HRF cap. And that is all really contingent on what kind of, we don't want to be unpredictable. And that's why I kind of put that typical budget in, what we can usually expect. And that helps us also not go nuts, and give away more money than we actually have. But yes, we do kind of have to monitor past year performances and generally stick to the more conservative estimates.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
Just one about the federal non-matching grants. Is that a separate pool of money, or is that out of?
It is the separate. Those are the historic preservation enhancement grants that you award, one of which we had on the agenda today. SHPOs across the country get a certain apportionment of congressional funding on a yearly basis, and we have to give 10% of that to CLGs. Now, we don't get $1.6 million from Congress. That what you awarded is more than the 10% that we are allotted. But because it's kind of complicated, we're on a 3-year grant cycle, and many times our CLGs are really slow to get their projects up and running. So that again is a matter of having, it is lapsing, but we have it for 3 years. So we're able to allot more than the 10% that we get from the Park Service. But to answer your question, yes, those are the non-matching federal funds that we get from the National Park Service for redistribution only to certified local governments.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
So say thank you, Mary. This is really helpful.
Yeah. Which leads us right into the next item, Mary. Eligible activities under survey and planning.
Yeah, and I try to keep that as not as complicated as possible, but this refers to the non-matching grants that we recently instituted for plans and specifications, which are going great. People love them and they're feeding right into HRF. It's going fabulous. But we've been getting a lot of subsequent requests once they get these grants for additional funds for environmental testing. And I know that we discussed this at a previous meeting that if an architect is giving a budget for plans and specs, I guess they don't feel qualified to also include environmental testing because that's a separate sort of consultation. So I'm asking if we can ask the architects to consult with environmental teams, firms to provide an estimate for environmental testing to include in the grant application, if that makes sense. That's one thing. And then another one that has come up not so often is cost estimating. And I think I've had this conversation offline with a few people. When an architect does a condition assessment, they usually include probable costs. But that's not a binding figure. It can be helpful for the grantee to figure out what their eventual restoration costs will be, but it's not fair to expect the architect to stick to that cost, because as we've seen in the matter of months, costs can go up and for materials and labors. So we don't get it as often, but we have gotten requests to include the cost of an actual project cost estimator to give the grantee a better idea of what their fundraising obligation is going to be. So I guess my question is, included in this non-matching grant for architectural plans and specifications, can we also allow a line item for possible environmental testing like lead, asbestos, things like that, and also a line item if needed for a cost estimator for the actual project costs? This is sort of a discussion item, and if you agree, we can move forward.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah.
Mary, I'm listening to you, and I just want to sort of go back one moment. So, a client is working with a team of design professionals, and so there is one firm that's the lead, and then there are a whole bunch of sub-consultants underneath them. And you previously, if for example, the architect was the head of the team and they said, well, I need a structural engineer and I need an MEP engineer and I might need a civil engineer. And the SHPO really hasn't gotten down into making sort of management decisions about the team members. A cost estimator, a professional cost estimator, and a professional industrial hygienist, I would think, fall under the umbrella of the architects or engineers team. And as such, I wouldn't see that we would have to sort of specifically get into the selection and the review. But Paul, what's your perspective here?
Well, I think we've talked about it previously, specifically about hazardous material testing, that it's sort of outside of our legal scope.
Exactly.
We can't be responsible for that. So it's really the client would hire them directly, not as part of the architect's scope.
Okay.
Directly and separately, but with the understanding that they're working together. You can't have one consultant working over here doing what they do and the other team over here. I mean, just because they're under separate contracts, which they have to be, because even I can't hire environmental, they have to work as a team collectively for the fiduciary obligation to the client and whoever that client is. So the client will have multiple contracts for the different areas of expertise, but it's for the project, if that helps.
Yeah, and actually, this is really helping me to clarify. And I think it might be just incumbent on me to remind the grantee that they may want to include or consult during the application process with an industrial hygienist or a hazardous material, environmental investigation team. Because as an example, we did award a non-matching grant to an applicant, and then based on the architect's scope of work. And then they came back after the fact and said, oh, we need environmental testing. And I'm like, yikes, why didn't you include it in the application? And I understand why it was not included in the architect's scope, based on our conversations. But since that probably is a valid activity under this type of planning grant, I think I would just have to ask the grantee to get that separate quote. Correct? Is that?
Yeah, and it could be as simple as adding another box or another line on the application, environmental investigation or industrial hygiene, so that it doesn't get lost in the conversation.
Yeah, okay.
But those would be separate contracts for the same project.
Right, and that's how that's how it's playing out with this specific.
And so, and again, I open this up for the council, but so then, Mary, the application comes in and it's a $200,000 thing, but it has all of those expertise included.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, I just think the grantee, or specifically this grantee, did not anticipate that. And so they covered the cost of the environmental testing. And I'm just thinking if they had known to get a quote, they could have included that in this application. And so I think from now on, I will just make that part of the conversation.
Beth,
I mean, sometimes it's not necessary, but sometimes it is. Yeah.
Beth Ackley, do you have any insight or thoughts?
No, I think we've just circled around it, which is, there's an application which reflects a project, and under that there's, a series of a consultant, a prime consultant who has whichever sub-consultants are needed on the project, and then at the same level as them, hired by the owner, is this industrial hygienist, potentially, if needed, that can work with the team but gets paid directly through the owner, which is potentially grant funded. But that makes a lot of sense, and I think having that even wrapped into the application is a great service to the applicants to just start thinking about that, so it's not a surprise. Oh, look, that looks like asbestos. Oh boy, maybe we need to do something about this, or and helps the projects move forward more quickly.
Yeah, go ahead, Sarah. Yeah.
Another question, Mary. There's hazardous material that's sort of little in scope, and then you've got whole sites that are brownfields that may have a history on them. So is there public funding available through other entities at DECD that our applicants should know about, depending upon the size and the scope of the hazardous materials that need to be reviewed?
Yeah, well, good point. I mean, we do have brownfields funding within DECD. I need to check with our colleagues to see who are the eligible applicants for that and how that funding flows. Because yeah, you're right. If they've got $100,000 environmental cleanup, we're not going to be able to cover that for so. Yeah. Okay.
All right. Any last thoughts or comments, questions for Mary?
I have a quick question, and hopefully this isn't a can of worms, but just thinking about Matthew's Community Investment Fund presentation a little while ago. How do you handle it, Mary, when someone comes in and says, I have this project? And maybe this is a question for everybody at SHPO. Are you also serving to kind of look holistically about other areas where the project can be funded, or do you just start thinking about that if it doesn't really fit into the specifics of SHPO grant funding.
Yeah, I mean, our pool of eligible applicants and resources and projects is fairly narrow.
Yeah.
So, but we do try to keep tabs on what federal funding might be available. Like some of our grantees will match our funding with SAT, but Save America's Treasures funding. Preservation Connecticut has a small pool of funding. We could probably do more to kind of figure out what else is eligible, you know, if we can't cover something.
Yeah. But by the time they get to you, do they often know that, yes, we fit into this and we're applying? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We rarely, I mean, there's, with one exception, we're going to discuss later at staff meeting, we rarely get an applicant that's so off base they don't, they're not eligible. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you.
Great. Mary, thank you very much. Matthew's gone, but that was a great session. Appreciate it. Next item on the agenda is liaison with public and private agencies. Is Jane with us?
Good morning, everybody.
Hi, Jane.
Hi. So 2 announcements. May 4th, Connecticut Preservation Awards. It's happening at the New Haven Country Club. And the highlight of the evening will be our Harlan Griswold Award that we're presenting in partnership with the SHPO office, and it's going to Jared Edwards this year. So I hope you can attend so we can all celebrate the lifetime achievements of Jared. And also this week we're announcing our Talking About Preservation series for spring. And some of the speakers we have coming up, Dr. Glazer will be talking about her book, Interpreting Energy at Museums and Historic Sites. New Haven Preservation Trust recently published a book, and they'll be discussing theirs. It's the Builder Book, Carpenters, Masons, and Contractors in Historic New Haven. We'll also have a session on Lustron houses, a session on dendrochronology, and then our last session will be a lead up to the Docomomo conference. So we'll have a preview of the national symposium that they're bringing to New Haven, Complexities of the Modern American City. So an exciting series, and we hope you can join us for our lunchtime Zoom talks.
Great, thank you, Jane. Jonathan, do we have anybody from Connecticut Preservation Alliance?
Connecticut Preservation Action. Jane, do you have anything to report for them?
Not particularly. We get weekly reports from our lobbyist, Capital Consulting, and there's like 36 bills that are tracking and dying and all over the place. Nothing to particularly report on for that.
Okay.
And I know that Connecticut Preservation Action, one of their working items for this year is to build a historic preservation caucus among our legislators, because we have 80 or more new legislators, and that would be a big component in advocating for the community investment funds should we ever have that issue rise. So those are our immediate working tasks.
Great, thank you, Jane. Next item on the agenda is public forum. And I know we have one guest with us today, Todd Bryant. Todd, would you introduce yourself and then the floor is yours.
Sure. I'm Todd Bryant. Thank you, first of all, for the opportunity to speak today. I'm Todd Bryant. I'm president of the Norwalk Preservation Trust. And we are primarily an advocacy group here in Norwalk. We were founded in, I think, 2001 or 2, and kind of became a certain 501c3 in 2004. And we've been working to try to further historic preservation in Norwalk by any means we can think of. And
Todd,
I'm here today to talk about.
Todd, you're breaking up for some reason.
Oh, I'm sorry. I got to apologize for that in advance because my internet connection through Optimum is especially wonky today for whatever reason. So probably because they knew I was going to be speaking. I don't know. Anyway, So I'm sorry, but I just have to suffer through that.
Yep, that's fine.
So we were in fact founded because of an issue that became a successful SEPA suit, the Norwalk Preservation Trust versus the Norwalk Inn and Conference Center, which was also taken on by the Attorney General Dick Blumenthal at the time, and Alan was the attorney. And I'm very concerned about what I'm perceiving. At least the way what I'm perceiving as the current process for SEPA. Now, this is nothing against Todd or Marina, who I consider, a brother and sister in preservation, but I'm still concerned. First of all, you never got to see the 31 to 35 South Main Street issue.
No.
That decision was made by staff, and no, did you get
I was
see
part-
it?
Todd,
35 South Main Street, Norwalk?
Todd, I was part of a conversation with Todd and Jonathan, but the council has not seen it.
That was the question. Yeah. So it never came before the council.
Correct.
And my understanding was that at least, and also the process that was followed when we did all those years ago when we did Norwalk Inn, was that the issue came before the council, and then you guys would discuss it and then either ask the Attorney General for their assistance or not, which did not happen in this case, and that concerns me. Secondly, the definition of shepherd, as Alan always defined it, in my understanding, is that it was not so much somebody who could save the building, but an advocate on the ground. And I think Sarah Nelson was here for that at the council meeting the last time Alan did a training session, in which he literally brought me in as a shepherd for the 93 East Avenue issue. So the definition of shepherd has changed from advocate to saver of the building, whatever, however you would like to call that. I think it's the advocate that needs to move these things along, otherwise nothing happens. And the other thing that concerns me a lot is the idea that we should be looking at whether or not the developer is going to lose any money.
Todd, I'm sorry, you zoned out there. The developer what?
I don't think that's. I say the other thing that concerns me is the concept that the developer shouldn't lose any money in a SEPA process, and I find that backwards. If you approach it that way, it's a loser every time, because if the developer had figured out a way to include the building in this project, we wouldn't be here.
Right.
So this really is a problem for me. It seems like it's the death of SEPA, because if you're looking at it from the developer's perspective rather than the perspective of the public trust in preserving historic buildings, then what's the point? I'm just very, very worried about this, and I again, this is nothing against Todd or Marina, but I think the process has somehow evolved in a strange way that's turned it on its head.
Mm-hmm. Does anybody have any questions?
I don't know what to do about it except to bring up that issue with.
Yeah, no, Todd, that's great.
Pardon
And it's very good. And I'm glad you stuck it out and held on so that you could talk with us. Does anybody have any questions for Todd?
No, very quickly, could I share my screen so you can see the building we're talking about?
Sure.
Okay. If I can find, yeah.
Tom, I'll just ask one question while we're waiting for the image.
Go ahead,
Sure.
Paul.
The first line of defense is the local review process, and for the particular project, SEPA is the last resort. So, how
Right.
was that process handled in terms of this building?
How do you mean local review in terms of, can
Well,
you see that?
You have to go through the planning commission and your historic review boards
Right.
and things like that. So
The
was
historical
there a lack of
commission,
support from all of those?
No, the historical commission definitely voted to preserve the building, but they were ignored by the by the zoning commission. The zoning commission didn't even, despite the fact that there's a very strong preservation section of our current plan of conservation development that I was involved in writing, and they just blew it off. They didn't require a third-party review. They did have an analysis from a paid consultant who did what he was paid to do, but they were not required to take a look at this and to see if they could include it in their plans. Third-party review didn't even address that. They basically believed whatever the developer told them and just blew off any preservation possibilities, which is another issue that I'm going to take up with the city. So as far as it went, the commission voted to preserve the building. The zoning commission ignored that, ignored what I consider their charge under the plan of conservation and development, and here we are. Can you see that screen?
No, not yet.
I don't know how to quite do this. I had share content.
Jonathan, does he have the ability to share his screen?
How do I do this?
Yeah, if you look up on the top right next to the leave button, there should be a share arrow.
Right, and I hit that.
Yeah.
And then it says share content, and I turn that on.
If you click on Windows, if you have the material open, the photo open, if you click on Windows, it should be one of those, and you can select the one you'd like to share.
Okay. There it is. Can you see that?
Yes, now we can see it.
Okay. So here is the, I think, 6 or 8 story hotel. This is the building in question. It is extremely important to this streetscape, as you can see. It is included in the Washington Street and South Main Street Historic District boundary extension of 1985. The reason it wasn't included in the original district was that it was contemplated to have this whole block taken out in urban renewal, but Mayor Bill Collins managed to stop that in the early 70s or the late 70s. So that's the story, and what was approved was this building will go away completely, and this hotel will be expanded at the same height into that spot, which causes irreparable damage to the streetscape and the edge of the historic district. But if you look at it and say, well, a developer can't lose any money. Oh no, he has to get the number of rooms he wants, everything else, and what's the point? I'm terrified that this is the direction that the SEPA process is going. Because if we can't make it work at the local level, SEPA is the last resort. This is the nuclear option, which we now don't have effectively, unless you already have somebody who's either going to, save the building or do something else that But if you're telling a developer, in fact, sorry to go on like this, but I remember in our city, you could, any use, it doesn't matter what you do. And Alan said, yes, as long as the architectural integrity of the building is preserved. Now it seems like, yes, as long as the developer gets what he wants.
All right. Thank you, Todd. Any other questions for Todd?
I'm just trying to understand a little bit more. So this is within a local historic district, Todd?
No, it's a National Register district.
Okay. And the local historic district was commission reviewed this as an advisor to the Planning and Zoning Commission?
No, we have a strange situation here. We do not have a we do or we don't have a local historic district. There's some discussion about that, but we do have a historical commission, which is a city commission. It's charged with maintaining and dealing with all the city-owned historic properties, of which there are several, and then commenting on other historic preservation issues.
So advisory.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it is a city commission, but it doesn't function as a land use commission as it probably should.
And a demolition permit has been pulled?
Well, there was a 120-day delay, which we put on immediately, and which was, and then they also had our demolition ordinance allows for a public hearing at the historical commission, which they held. It was poorly, very, very poorly publicized. And they voted yet again at the public hearing to preserve the building. But when that 120 days delay runs out, which I think was either yesterday or today, that building could be gone now, as far as I know. And also at the review board, this was on the last review. Building is still contributing to the National Register District.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Todd. I don't know how to proceed, but I do appreciate you coming in and giving us your many years of experience and insight. So thank you very much. And again, thank you for sticking out the meeting.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, the cats are entertaining me.
All right. I'm gonna move on. Todd, thank you so much.
All
next
right,
on
thanks
the
again. And I just, sorry, but just at the end, I just want to ask you folks to review the procedure and take a look at it in more detail.
Yes.
Thanks again.
All right. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is announcement of our next meeting, which is Wednesday, May 3rd, 2023 at 9:30. And then an adjournment. Before we adjourn, I just want to say, Sarah, thank you for being prepared to take over for me. I'm actually surprised I made it through the meeting. So thank you, everybody, for helping out. May I have a motion to adjourn today's meeting?
So
Marguerite.
All right.
Sorry, Marguerite, I'll second, and I hope you feel better, Tom.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. All right, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Hi, everybody.
Deborah, we're going to give the motion to Sarah Nelson and the second to Marguerite.
Sarah, then Marguerite. I got it.